Welcome to the Hollywood Garbage Dump Review, or rather today, the Disney Garbage Dump Review, where we review full movies or movie trailers, most often to determine whether or not they're including within these movies any hidden imagery or symbols that aren't obviously connected with the main ideas or easily understood by the audience, but that have significant meaning behind them. But as I mentioned, at times I will review entire movies. So when I do that, I don't really get into detail on the different hidden images or symbols because it would be a much longer video. Although I find with the trailers, you can determine in large part whether or not the movie is going to include certain symbols or imagery because the trailer is usually full of them. And so you can extrapolate to some degree based on the review of the trailer for hidden imagery and symbols, just how much is in the movie. But when it comes to our full movie reviews, what I try to do is just critique the basic plot of the movie, whether or not it was pulled off and convincing, well acted, and whether or not the movie was presented in a way that would be worth your time and money. So whether it's Hollywood or whether it's Disney, when they release a movie that in my opinion is trash or garbage, either from the hidden imagery or symbols or because the movie itself was not well done or delivered an inappropriate message and does not bring anything healthy to our entertainment table, right? We go to movies to be entertained. And while we may like different things, some like drama, some like horror, some like comedy, some like action. As Christians, this is a Christian channel overall, what I try to do is look at them in terms of whether or not they're of any benefit to society. If I don't see the movie, then again, if I don't review the trailer, I usually don't talk about it. But if there's a movie or a movie trailer that I review and that I think is going to be a problem for some people or convey certain messages, ideas that aren't healthy, like garbage, then I consider it basically Hollywood or Disney or whoever's presenting these movies to us as dumping a bunch of garbage or trash on us, like backing up a garbage truck and just dumping it on our front driveway. So, because, we're sitting in the seat, we're watching their movie, it's basically coming over us, right? And in terms of the screen, the presentation, the audio, we're either absorbing something that's useful, either because of pure entertainment value, or there's some kind of message delivered that usually, hopefully, can give people food for thought, something good to think about so that when we're out in the real world, we can hopefully draw upon the forms of entertainment or books or movies that we've read or watched and learn from them, from the things we saw. But of course, as we know, there are all kinds of different movies, and I mentioned that at the outset. So what I try to do is just focus squarely on those issues. Does it have hidden imagery or symbolism? And two, is it in any way beneficial to us? Even including all of the different types of movie genres and potential likes and dislikes of people. But keeping it within a certain Christian morale where obviously we don't treat other people the way we don't want to be treated, right? We don't go stealing from people and practice stealing. We're not talking about momentary weakness or certain exceptions to some of these morals in general. Christians and many others don't agree that stealing, lying, cheating, murder, these are all things that can happen on their own at times. But to promote them, right, among humankind and say, look at this murder, look at this horror, watch this big theft. There's not a whole lot of benefit involved. It might be well acted, the graphics may be real, but what is it really conveying? What's our meal? What are we eating? What are we being served? Well, if it's trash, we're going to talk about it. And sometimes when it's good, of course, I'll give positive reviews, but I'm more so doing these movie and trailer reviews as a sort of side to the channel because a lot of us do enjoy movies or films and entertainment. But, not only for our own benefit and for others, but just to understand what society is consuming, what they're thinking because of these movies. And so you can tell what people are interested in certain respects. So when it comes to a movie like Star Wars, it's been around since the 70s, and the original trilogy was a big hit in terms of George Lucas and everyone associated with him pulling off a sci-fi trilogy during a time when you didn't have green screen and other graphics that sometimes make it better, sometimes don't. But certainly what they were able to produce in the first 3 Star Wars films is really amazing. They did a great job, at least in terms of the production, the presentation for what they had. And then with the story, it connecting through all 3 films, it had everything. It had sci-fi, it had romance, it had drama, action, it dealt with family issues, it had big surprises, and it inspired people, because it was a battle of good against evil in ways that you could relate to, right? So even if it's not a Christian movie, and these aren't really Christian movies, right? They're not written by Christians or presented in a Christian line of thought. They may borrow from different religious ideas in terms of putting the story together. But what Christians and others nonetheless can take away from these movies and have in the past is this idea of not giving in to the dark side or not giving in to what is clearly wrong, even if we're not always right or if we struggle at times. And so you see Luke Skywalker going through this struggle from a young, immature boy or teenager, not really knowing his father or his real family, but growing up nonetheless and having ideas and aspirations, wanting to do something positive, make a difference in life in ways that he felt qualified to do. Join the academy. Of course, to what extent he understood the empire and all of its relationships and involvements. I mean, there are little things he says here and there. But it's only really when the story takes off and Obi-Wan, Ben Kenobi, tells him who his real father, tells him a lot of things, doesn't tell him who his real father is, but he tells him, actually, he doesn't tell him that initially, but he tells him things that connect him with learning about the Force that he then goes through a number of different trials, uses his pilot skills, goes on an adventure with Han Solo, rescues Princess Leia. Then they use the plans, attack the Death Star that's being used by the Emperor to control systems and bend them to his will in ways that obviously are not in line with how CWJah does things. He lets people choose and then they're judged based accordingly. But this is a different universe, different type of environment, but it still has that light and dark side, that good versus evil equation that regardless of your religion, you can get drawn into and be inspired by, hopefully toward things that are actually happening in real life, right? There are times when people get so involved with these movies, they actually can displace your thoughts while you're in the real world and become a limitation. And so there's only a certain extent to which anybody who's trying to follow a Christian path can benefit from science fiction movies because they take you outside of the real world. And again, unless they're providing some kind of benefit, some kind of example or inspiration even, right? Even, like I said, you watch some of these Star Wars films or parts of them, the early ones, and there are inspirational moments. Does that benefit you? Does that then inspire you to go out into the real world and do what the equivalent is in real life? Not in the Star Wars universe, obviously, right? It's not real. But if you're not able to make that divide and detach and take from the movie the lessons that apply in real life and then affect them versus the movie just affecting you while you're in real life, well, so there's a balance there that has to be found if possible, or these movies can really do damage, actually, and especially if the message is one that is meant to undermine how we're made, how we best work together in life. And so when it comes to things like Star Wars, initially the trilogy involved, like I said, things like romance. There was no association of homo or gay abuse, no pansexualness that became associated with the Solo movie under Disney, it was hetero all the way. and that is how we're made. We're made as heteros. Homo and trans, these are all aberrations. They're not normal. That's not how we are designed. Those are just choices that people make that are more or less difficult according to how they were born and what they choose in life. Either way, I'm a hetero, and I most of the time can control my hetero-ness. I don't have to go out and have hetero relations with every person I meet. So even if you're a homo or transsexual in terms of your identity, the fact is you can control yourself, just like I can. And I'm pure hetero. I have no confusion whatsoever. I know exactly what I am and what I'm for. So there's nothing that would hold me back, except I realize that certain things have limits, and I try to work within those limits so that it's best for me and other people. And where I fail, I try to make things better and move on and do the right thing going forward. What else can you do, right? But when you're promoting things that are directly abusive to yourself and others, like homo, then, that's not a benefit to anyone. Not even people who are openly homo, right? No one's saying people who are gay can't practice their way in societies that allow it to be done. But it's not beneficial. It doesn't even benefit the homos who are involved, right? Because it physically abuses them. They're emotionally abused because they're not performing a sexual act according to how they're actually made. And so the abuse combined with the illusion that somehow they're doing something similar to normal hetero mating damages them. Obviously, spiritually, it damages them because they're not able to cultivate a relationship with God in the way that a normal hetero would, because they're knowingly damaging themselves and other people for the sake of their own pleasure or desire. Now, to the extent that they fight that desire and merely succumb at times, that's like all of us, right? But that doesn't mean you go promoting the weak parts of life. So when these movies do that, whether it's things like homo or spiritism, talking with the dead, as if that's an advantage, it's a concern. It's not something that we go to these movies to learn. We go to these movies to be entertained. These are not documentaries. These are not educational presentations that are supposed to be informative in terms of teaching everybody the right way. They're just movies by people who write words down in a script, as a script of words that are made up unless they're based off of real life. And then characters are invented to create this universe and story. So when it comes to Star Wars, you have the early part with George Lucas, the first three, which are numbered differently, but nonetheless, as they came out, I'll refer to them. They didn't have anything. It had the Spiritism aspect, which I'm going to highlight in this review, as you can tell also from the title of the movie review. It really is, in terms of episode 9, the rise of Spiritism, because if you go back to the original trilogy, while there were things like the Force, especially then at the end when Obi-Wan returns as a Force ghost, talks to Luke after he's killed, and then he blows up the Death Star. That's obviously not a Christian way of thinking. And so, as I said at the outset, these movies aren't meant for Christian education. They merely at times are able to convey a helpful message, a good example, something that illustrates a point that we can carry with us if we encounter that same illustrated thing in life. Or they inspire us in some way that then inspires us to do something similar from what we see in the sci-fi in real life. But when it openly promotes things that are either abusive, not helpful to individuals or society, or that directly put one in conflict with wholesome spiritual teaching that teaches about life and living and communicating with God, and in place of it, they put speaking with the dead warriors. Basically just dead warriors, right? The Jedi, they're all just dead warriors. And at times they convey wisdom. They used to anyway, right? In episode 9, as I'll talk about later, there's not much wisdom, not from the Jedi. And so Yoda and others, and Ben Kenobi, we're used to them kind of being sages, warrior sages. But really, in episode 9 and even from the first trilogy, the people that are dead and who are talking to the living are warriors. So spirits of warriors who are Force ghosts, and apparently that's only something the Jedi can do, or most of the Jedi. I don't think any of the Sith, or maybe only a select few Sith, can Force ghost, what they call it. But whereas in the first trilogy, you did have Ben Kenobi in this respect, and then in Return of the Jedi, you had Yoda, and then Anakin, the older Anakin, appear with Ben Kenobi at the very end. It's limited to certain situations, and it's probably most presented when in Empire Strikes Back, Luke goes to visit Yoda, and Ben Kenobi's there, and Yoda's there, and they're all communicating. So there's definitely Spiritism in that respect in these movies. But in the first trilogy and in the second trilogy, I don't think there was any Force ghost communication. So the first trilogy had it to a limited extent. And, these are sci-fi movies. They're not meant to be Christian. So, I think most Christians understood, this limited presentation of these Force ghosts, Ben Kenobi basically, and at the end again, Yoda and Anakin, Return of the Jedi. It wasn't depicted and presented in such a way to really make you think, I can do this. Yeah, this is what happens in real life. It was kind of it was presented in a way that made it seem very sci-fi. And so, while not really Christian and something to be concerned about as an element in any movie, Talking with the Dead, Episode 9, Rise of Skywalker, really carries this to another level. And you can see here even from the poster, and already from the title of this video, there's going to be spoilers. So if you don't want to be spoiled, you should turn this off now and watch the rest later. Spiritism begins and ends this movie. From the opening crawl to the final scenes, Spiritism is all throughout this movie. At least twice, maybe 3 times, Rey, I've only seen it once, and there's a lot going on, but at least twice for sure, Rey, basically the equivalent or the displacement of Luke in this movie, says, she kind of goes into a meditation and she starts communicating with the dead Jedi, and she starts saying, be with me, be with me, be with me. And she's basically praying, to the spirits of the dead Jedi. And then there's another instance where the Emperor reveals himself to Kylo Ren, the son of Han Solo and Princess Leia, but who was turned to the dark side, at least for most of this movie and most of the trilogy. The Emperor comes inside Ben's head, basically, and speaks to him in all the voices of the different characters like Vader, Snoke, and himself. So there's Spiritism there. I mean, he's openly speaking to him in his mind in ways similar to what we've already described, but he's been basically every voice, not just one voice, like Ben Kenobi was one voice to Luke. The Emperor says he's been every voice inside Kylo's head. And then, as you saw also if you've watched this trilogy, in the prior movies, Rey and Kylo have sort of a telepathy, Force connection, and it's really enhanced in this movie to the point where, objects are being switched just from the telepathic connection, and they're so much able to enter each other's presence, or at least Kylo can enter her presence in a way that allows him to actually physically touch or take things that are there with her. And so he's able to determine where she is and things. So it's really developed further, far beyond even what was in The Last Jedi. Now, the Emperor, at one point later in the movie, he openly states Spiritism or possession is part of his plan. He openly tells Rey that if she kills him, he will possess her body and live on through her. We'll talk about this a little bit more later because it's kind of inconsistent. But he definitely openly states his plan is to possess Rey. So possession, demon possession, spirit possession. There's no other way you can make that connection other than that Palpatine and Rey, that the plan involves possession, spirit possession, in this case Emperor Palpatine. And then at the very end, or near the very end, the final battle between basically Rey and the Emperor. But it really becomes at least according to what they say. The Emperor says that he has all the powers of the Sith and that he's going to use them against Rey. And then Rey, we'll talk about it more in a minute, but she basically does a defensive act and says she has all the powers of the Jedi. And that's one of her be with me moments. She calls upon all the powers of the Jedi, and they all start speaking with her, voices in her head. And so then they obviously start channeling to her various powers and ability, one of which is the ability to block Sith lightning with your saber, like Mace Windu did in Revenge of the Sith in the prequels. So Rey does that move on him with one lightsaber. And even though Palpatine, the Emperor, did that move on Mace Windu, that's apparently his special skill to be able to redirect Force lightning. So Rey's using that power. She blocks his lightning with one sword. And then the Emperor just keeps firing his Sith lightning right at her, right directly at her. Even though he did that move on Mace Windu before, and Mace Windu blocked it and deformed him before Anakin showed up, cut off his hand, all that stuff. So he's already known the move. He already knows what it can do. He keeps doing it while she has one saber. And then I guess it's Princess Leia or Leia's Force Ghost sends Rey. I think this is what happened. Again, I'd have to watch this part over. But somehow she gets another lightsaber. And I think it's Princess Leia's lightsaber. Princess Leia becomes like a Jedi Master in this movie. You know, that was nowhere really hinted at previously. It's kind of cool, actually. But it doesn't connect. So they put in this movie in one sense shows you, in terms of the Star Wars saga, what they could have done, but it was done at the very last minute to try to save them. And there's no way you can do that to make a trilogy work. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But just to conclude this whole Spiritism thing, so then she gets the second lightsaber and blocks his lightning and then does the Mace Windu thing, but she totally destroys him. And he just keeps firing the lightning at her, you know, from the first saber to the second saber block. So makes no sense to me why the Emperor. Now, prior to this, the Emperor, right before he fights Rey, at the end, the battle I just described, where he calls on all the powers of the Sith and she calls on all the powers of the Jedi, and then she redirects his lightning and kills him. Before that, he had shot up into space from this place he's in, called Exegol, I believe. He fired lightning out of both hands into space and surrounded gigantic cruisers and starships. Excuse me. And the lightning disabled them and started bringing them down. But in this battle with Rey, he just does direct, straight-on Force lightning. Exact same position that he did with Mace Windu, and she does the same thing, kills him. Very anticlimactic in terms of you're bringing Palpatine back, first of all. That seems so... and the reason I believe they did that is because it's a part of undoing the original trilogy. I'll get to that in a moment. But really, at that point, there's no reason why the Emperor couldn't have just surrounded Rey with all of his lightning, just like he did with those big ships, and disabled her. Right? She can't block lightning from all around her. And he could have easily just disabled her instead of firing it right at her so she could block it right back at him. But he didn't. So that was just lame. Right? You're going to bring Emperor Palpatine back. Probably the biggest, baddest bad guy in Star Wars. For that? it was ridiculous. So the whole return of Palpatine is pretty lame. The actor, like everyone's been saying, does the same job. He's a good emperor. But it just doesn't fit. It seemed to me to be forced in to have Rey become the chosen one instead of Luke or Anakin. Either one. She displaces both of them. She displaces everyone. Except in one sense, Kylo, they kind of are revealed as what they call a dyad. Although, I'll try not to spoil everything, but she lives on. Kylo does not. So in either case, she's pretty much displaced everyone. Even at the end of the movie, she takes on the Skywalker name. This lady asks her, what's your name? She goes, Rey. She goes, Rey what? Rey Skywalker. And yet she's the granddaughter of Emperor Palpatine, they revealed in this movie. Whereas before, she was no one. So I guess they just took that criticism and said, okay, you want her to be someone, we'll make her someone even more important than Luke. Who's more important than Darth Vader's son? Palpatine's granddaughter. It's like everything they tried to give Rey, it was to be better than whoever else had something like that. And then she ends up at the end with this gold lightsaber, which is kind of cool. But again, it doesn't make any sense. The different things that happen, the elevation of her powers in ways that didn't require any training. She does some training in this movie, but she doesn't even complete that training. And yet she's powerful enough to do so many other things. That training should have been really easy. Nonetheless, it seemed like they were just putting that in there to satisfy people who were complaining that she was powerful, too powerful for no training in the prior films. So a lot of this movie is trying to pacify the fans who weren't happy to this point, but then also continue the process of basically deconstructing Star Wars and in its place putting this new Disney version, which is why the first one seems so similar to A New Hope. And then in this one, they just undo the death of Palpatine. That never happened, or didn't happen the way we thought. And now Rey's going to take care of that, and she does once and for all. So just like Kathleen Kennedy, the head of Lucasfilm, when she started to run the thing, openly declared with her shirts in different group that she's a feminist, right? The Force is female, not the Force is just a gender neutral thing. She specified female, not male, basically. If it's female, it's not male. So she took that hard line and carried it all the way through the end. And most fans of Star Wars are not feminists. Most fans of Star Wars are not gay. There's as many gay kisses as there are hetero kisses in this movie, I'm pretty sure. Maybe one or two real quick ones that are hetero. But in terms of kisses, Kylo and Rey have one, momentous kiss at the end. But it doesn't go anywhere. And then there are two lesbian pilots, who kiss at the end, even though that kissing cannot stimulate the type of organs necessary for a reproductive act or proper stimulation without fake things. So they're promoting homo abuse in these movies. They're promoting Spiritism from start to the end. The opening crawl, as I said, is "The dead speak." I kid you not. The opening words are "The dead speak." It's something pretty much like that. And it's referencing a broadcast that's, I guess, sent out throughout the universe where Palpatine gives an ominous message of revenge and he's not dead. And why would he do that, right? You'll find out in this movie, in addition to the rise of Spiritism from start to end and the presentation of homo, you're going to find that so many things happen that make no sense. A few that I've mentioned, but others that are just so unbelievable. The Emperor's got like hundreds, if not 1,000 or more, gigantic starships with Death Star laser technology mounted right on the bottom. So one Star Destroyer, those big, like triangular Empire ships. One of those can basically destroy a planet now, and does in this movie. Yet, even though one of those Star Destroyers is sent and destroys a planet, I mean, the Emperor could literally send one of those to each solar system and tell each solar system, if any of you get out of line, the Death Star cruiser will just patrol right over to your planet, you're done. If you go too far, whatever. I'm just speaking of it in terms of this movie, right? Yet that doesn't happen. The Death Star tech doesn't save the Emperor in any way. So the whole broadcast to start the movie makes no sense. He could have just positioned a Star Destroyer over each solar system and then made his broadcast. Right? It didn't make any sense to broadcast that, I'm coming, I'm not dead. Oh, okay. Well, we'll get ready for you then. We'll prepare so we can stop you, which is exactly what they do. Kylo Ren goes looking for him, and then he gets involved with Rey when he finds out about her relationship with Palpatine. Then she goes looking for him. Rey can do anything. She heals. She brings back the dead. So does Kylo Ren. They each bring each other back, basically. But she also heals animals. She's able to pilot this, like, ragtag sail cruiser through the most massive storm you can imagine, right? You see it kind of in the trailers with the Death Star piece there and huge way. Everyone's looking around. All the men are looking around like, I guess we'll just go in the morning We're too weak and dumb to get there in these conditions. Oh, where's Rey? Well, she's halfway across these unbelievable conditions already. So, at every turn they take digs at men. They try to elevate women above men. Basically, remember, they're trying to undo everything Jah does right. So instead of hetero, they go homo. Instead of men as the head of women, they put women as the head of men. They're doing everything backwards and wrong that they can find. And then they just give you the crumbs of normalcy here and there. And that's why a lot of these channels that I watch, some of them are very entertaining. Good channels in terms of the movie reviews, I think that they do. But I see a lot of them, especially long-term Star Wars fans, they grew up with it and they've never really displaced it with something more significant like religion. I mean, I enjoy certain things, but I'm not a fan in that sense. You kind of grow up at some point, but not everybody does. And so it can be important for many people, even adults. And what I hear them saying on a lot of their channels is, Disney needs to change this, change that, and the Mandalorian, this will save Star Wars. You might get things like the Mandalorian if that's what you like. And they'll keep doing those things to keep you involved. There's too much money, right? I mean, they're not going to totally exclude fans. But even with things like the Mandalorian, they're going to feminize them. They're going to homo them. And they're going to inject spiritism all throughout. Pansexuality. Everything they're doing right now in all their other movies. Everything Disney stands for. Magic, witchcraft, sodomy. Women over men. No God, no Christianity. That's what you're going to get, no matter what series or trilogy it is. This trilogy was a disaster. It had a few good moments. And this last movie, episode 9, you could watch it. I mean, you wanted to see what was happening. So it wasn't unwatchable. It just didn't make any sense at a number of points. It was inconsistent with the prior films in a number of ways, intentionally. Right? They wanted to try to correct things, I guess. But it's so obvious, it makes it a bad movie. If you're going against the earlier films in the trilogy, there's no way you can be given a high score. You're inconsistent. You're not even telling the same story. We don't know which is what. But that's Disney, right? Confusion, turning things upside down. And so in one sense, it's kind of what they want, right? Mass confusion, gender identity, confusion. They don't want to have a binary clear system, even with areas of gray where people get to choose. They want to have basically anything goes. And that's pretty much what I think we're going to get and what we get in Rise of Skywalker. So they throw in a few things that I think heteros and even certain religious people would appreciate. But there's so much else, like Spiritism, all the examples I gave, homo representation, which is abuse, right, to women. You're basically setting an example by presenting two lesbians at the end of the movie in celebration, kissing extendedly and jumping around holding hands. You're basically promoting that view among women and girls like that's okay. It's not okay. How is it okay? Women aren't designed for that kind of relationship. It's a sign of mental illness and or a desire that's incompatible with how you're made or how another person's made. You can do it. I'm not going to stop you, but I'm not going to promote abuse. And these movies are promoting abuse. Not only that, they're promoting Spiritism and other ideas that have nothing to do with Jah or with the real world or with things that really even would benefit us by example. Right? We get one hetero kiss between Rey and Kylo, but no relationship. There's no good relationship of heteros anywhere in these movies. Han Solo and Princess Leia aren't together. Ben and Rey don't get together. Rey doesn't get together with Finn or Poe. Finn and Poe don't get together with anyone. So feminism is all throughout in this Disney trilogy, with Rey displacing Luke and others at every turn, beating Kylo with no training, undoing Anakin as the chosen one and displacing him as the same thing. Palpatine doing things that make no sense for the Emperor being who he's supposed to be. And this whole thing about him drawing Rey and Kylo to him so that he could either possess one of them. Again, makes no sense, because in these movies, it doesn't really seem to matter whether or not you're a descendant of a Jedi or a Sith, although they kind of make that seem relevant with Palpatine and Rey. But nonetheless, Palpatine's spirit is still alive. And it looks like either a cloned or his nearly dead body from Return of the Jedi is there. And he says he can possess Rey if she kills him. So Rey's not the most physically gifted person. She just has the Force in her lineage to him. So, and neither is Kylo Ren the most physically gifted. Why wouldn't the Emperor just have the most physically gifted person kill him and then have his spirit inhabit that body? He's the Emperor. He doesn't need anyone else's Force power. He's powerful. He's more powerful than any of them except Rey, without any kind of functional body. So there's so many inconsistencies and storylines in this movie and in the culmination of this trilogy that just make no sense, or that are just too dumb. Initially, and my youngest son will verify this, he made me the thumbnail. I had actually intended to, based on all the pre-movie release reviews, title this review Star Wars Rise of the Retardeds. And that was based on a bunch of leaks I was hearing. I was thinking, well, these are all true, and Palpatine's back, and this and that. I mean, this just make it so off the track, it's retarded. You know, it's going so far backwards that retarded. I was considering breaking that out on this one. Rise of the Retardeds. But, you know, in watching the movie, and I told my son this, and he felt similar, it's kind of sad. Sad in the sense that the original trilogy, as I mentioned before, had moments of inspiration, of hope, at least in terms of being able to take from what you were seeing lessons of good versus evil, of dealing with difficulty and adversity, and not quitting. These movies, I mean, they like make light of all that, displace it with something far worse, and then at the very end, in this episode, not episode 9, they kind of try to please everybody. And the result is you please nobody. You cannot please everybody. You can only try to do what's right to the best of your ability, and then where you make mistakes, you try to improve. They're not making mistakes here. I think a lot of people think they're making mistakes. This is the plan. The plan is destroy Star Wars in terms of the original idea. Replace it with this idea. Women over men, homo and hetero, or just homo, pansexual. We'll give you a little hetero here and there. Spiritism, no God, and that's what they want. Witchcraft, magic, anything but what we need in real life. At least in this new trilogy, it seems to me. We're not getting the kind of inspirational moments that even from a sci-fi film might motivate one to get more interested in what's really happening in life in a good way. That's not really what you get from these, and it's sad. It's sad to see them, because when you watch it, you hear Star Wars, you see Star Wars, you see the elements, the shell of Star Wars. It's like many of these false religions that take on the shell or the trappings of Christianity, and they use the Bible, and they use different images that they think people will associate with Christianity, like the cross and different things. And they use that to mark themselves versus the fruit of their works. And so they end up encasing themselves in this shell of religion, but it's empty inside. That's what Star Wars feels like under Disney. It's like a shell of the original version that's empty inside.